Do you know what? I think if George Russell continues to drive like he did in Austria, he could very quickly find his trophy cabinet start to fill up. Now let's not get ahead of ourselves. George isn't about to mount a late championship challenge or anything. I think especially since Canada, where he clearly lost his composure and suffered, we are now seeing a cool, calm and collected George Russell. He's beginning to drive now like he's had a word with himself, he's been reminded what his strengths are, and then because of this late incident in Austria, it's massively paid off for him. And then combining this with some of the performers that Mercedes have scraped out of the barrel, old Georgie boy could put himself in some really great positions and remind Ferrari and McLaren that they are not alone the best of the rest. And now because of the upgrades to the Mercedes W15 and its increased performance, George doesn't have to push himself to third or fourth or whatever and be driving at the absolute very limits of his capabilities with his hair on fire. It seems now like he might be able to hold these positions comfortably with even some performance in reserve and relax and put some Lionel Richie on. And this new development is vitally important to him because we've seen countless times where the errors he's made is because the pressure has been piled on in the final quarter of the race. Perhaps now he's understanding a bit more about racing at the front of the field as opposed to being a back marker. Like he's driving a Mercedes that's made of silk and not a Williams that you have to bludgeon to get any kind of performance out of. And maybe, just maybe, he's rewired his driving and got rid of those old habits that were so useful at the start of his career, which then later turned into hindrances. What I think George's win also did emphasise, and I don't really want to sound all linked in here, but it's the importance of not giving up and positioning yourself properly just in case the impossible does happen. And credit to him, George caught the fumbled ball beautifully and doubled his win tally. So now going into the British Grand Prix, George I'm sure is going to have his tail up, racing in front of his home crowd and everything, and might think that a win is on the cards. Whoa there, Georgie boy, slow down. It's so important that the win at Austria doesn't go to his head. But of course, you have to pull the best result out of a race as possible, so what do you do? Now, we've all seen what happens when George is the favourite to win a race, especially if he starts from pole or even the front row. There are times which he's looked overworked and flustered, and that is when the mistakes start to creep in. So what if he switched his mindset around? Now, I sense that he's on the road to this already, but instead of pushing for maximum points all the time, why not snatch, grab and quietly collect good points when you can? Now, I'm aware that might sound incredibly daft, almost like I'm saying don't push and it might pay off. But when you look at the Drivers' Championship right now, the main rivals which he has around him are Sergio Perez, Oscar Piastri and Lewis Hamilton, all of whom have shown great flashes of driving this year, but also have been very uppy-downy at times, especially Perez, which I'll get into shortly. So perhaps if George visualised this battle as a little four-way championship battle, he might be onto a winner there. Right now in the standings, everyone ahead of Perez has won a race. So if he chips away with the aim to leapfrog Perez and Piastri, he could then in time begin to catch up to Carlos Sainz. Now he might also have to contend with Lewis Hamilton, who will also see the benefits of the updated Mercedes W15. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens there, especially in front of the home crowd at Silverstone. And you never know, just by sitting contently in a position that will give you a decent haul of points, there could be an incident further up the field which will then naturally upgrade your position. Now I know what you're thinking, that it's silly to wait around just for something to happen. But in George's situation right now, where he's trying to unlearn some bad habits which have thrown away some good positions in the past, this could be the safest and surest way to boost your points tally race on race. Kind of like putting your pocket change in a piggy bank every day. After a while, it slowly adds up. Quantity over quality, just mass-produce points just like the Soviets produced T-34s. That's a tank, by the way. And with that, he could find himself slowly climbing up the driver standings. But just off topic slightly, something that was striking from Austria and put into stark contrast how George slotted in when Max and Lando fell off, was just how glaringly out of position Sergio Perez was and has been pretty much all season. If Max has any issues, especially with the RB20 underneath him, Perez should be right in there to slot in and save the day for Red Bull. Okay, so he had some damage, but it's just the same story over and over again now, and it's exactly why his position is still up for debate. So yeah, sorry, just had to kind of get that off my chest. Okay, now, where were we? Now, this season so far is actually shaping up to be much better than we all expected. The front end of the grid is beginning to close up and things are looking a lot more competitive now. So it's very easy to say that we could have a new bundle of drivers winning Grand Prix this season, but there's something we have to face and some may not want to hear this. So if you're a Norris, Sainz, Leclerc or Russell fan, you may want to cover your ears. So drivers aside from Max have only won races because Max has had a problem. And when I say problem, I mean made a mistake, had an incident, or just retired. Nobody has yet been able to beat Max Verstappen if he's had a faultless race with no issues and if the car is running at 100%. It's a grim reality, but someone's got to say it. But anyway, let me know in the comments. Now, especially with the quite disappointing 2023 season George had, he's probably going to be quite surprised with this positive upswing that his 2024 season has taken. Now, in the past, I've made claims that George might be at war with himself, or if he's overreaching his natural abilities. It might sound strong, but that was generally the feeling at the time. Now, I've always supported George Russell, but there were times where he was almost trying to be a Swiss Army knife F1 driver. An impossible task. But now it looks like he might have just found his own lane, which he's comfortable with. When he's in the green part of the Georgia meter, he's fast, consistent, and actually very surprising with what he's able to pull off on the track. But when he pushes too hard and he goes into the red side of the Georgia meter, that's when things start to fall apart. And we see that side of George, which has let him down so often in the past. But it looks like he's been working on some stuff, and he's on the right track now. He's definitely not the finished article and probably won't be for some time, but, you know, he's on his way. And also throw in a bit of luck with that too, because if you don't have that, well, you're screwed. So moving forward with the rest of 2024, if George can keep this momentum rolling, apply what he's kind of learned, and keep a lid on himself, I think he's going to be just fine. He could have an excellent season ahead if he just adopts the strategy of, I don't know what else to call it, just picking up the pieces. In fact, just be Chick Hicks from Cars. You know, Lightning McQueen and the other one will have a wreck, and you'll have a piston cup just land on your lap. Anyway, let me know in the comments, have we seen the turnaround of George Russell? Is this now George 2.0? Or will he go back to his higgledy-piggledy ways? Also, if you haven't already, why not subscribe to the channel? So click that little button below. It really helps the channel out, and we're just a little step closer to that lovely 5,000 mark. As always, I'm Paul. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you later. Cheers.